Hello and welcome to Rethink. This is Prasanna. Today we are going to talk about public safety systems, the RCB Stampede tragedy. Could technology have saved lives? That's the question we are going to look at today. 11 people went out to celebrate a victory and they never came home. Today we are going to talk about what went wrong and how it should never happen again. Important disclaimer: this video reflects my personal analysis and opinions only. It does not represent the views of my employer, any government authority, or any organization I am affiliated with. This content is not sponsored. The purpose of this discussion is not to assign legal blame to any person or institution, but to examine systemic gaps and explore how technology could improve public safety outcomes. Any reference to data systems is conceptual and refers to only to anonymized, aggregated information, not individual tracking. Homage to the victims of the tragedy. A solemn remembrance of the 11 people who lost their lives, acknowledging them as individuals who deserve to come home safely to their families and loved ones. We remember them. This conversation today is in their memory so that their loss leads to change. I would like to thank the first responders and helpers like the police personnel, stadium authorities, KCS staff, fire and emergency services, ordinary citizens, medical teams. To all of them, thank you. You prevented this tragedy from being even worse. You are the reason people made it home that night. What really happened? The RCB Victory Parade of June 4, 2025 had a planning failure. A celebration was announced at the Chinnaswamy Stadium, and crowds of people poured in to enter the Chinnaswamy Stadium. The crowd size was approximately 250,000 people converging on one stadium with two gates. And the critical window where tragedy struck was between 3:45 p.m. to 5:15 p.m., where the stampede occurred. There were 11 people dead. They died of compressive asphyxia. 56 were injured. There were many hot spots, which were the the deaths were centered around gate 7, gate 17, and 21. So this is what happened. Was this a crowd problem? No, this was a systemic failure, a planning plus monitoring gap in our system. I would like to show the timeline, from a forensic systems analysis perspective, that the digital signals were there, that the population was converging. A huge population of 250,000 people was slowly converging towards the Chinnaswamy Stadium. So if you look at the timeline, on June 3, the RCB team won the match. It was its maiden IPL title in 18 years. Already then, there was a signal surge, spike in data usage across Bengaluru as fans streamed the final moments. On June 4, crowds gathered and began congregating at Kempegowda International Airport and the team hotel. The hotspot formation there, the cell towers near the airport, showed abnormal density 6 hours before the event. So that there was information which was already there. At around 1 p.m. on June 4, with Hansauda arrival, players of RCB came for the state felicitation. Over 2 lakh people are already on the streets at that time. Network congestion was seen. Towers in the central business district of Bengaluru hit 90% capacity. At 3:14 p.m., there was a tweet from the RCB official handle. Then there was a digital trigger scene, a massive surge of handovers as fans from across the city moved towards the stadium. At 4 p.m., there was critical mass. An estimated 2.5 to 5 lakh people converged, or fans converged on the Chinnaswamy Stadium. This already led to saturation on the digital telecommunication network side. Cell towers in the stadium sector began dropping calls due to extreme density. A massive surge of handovers was also seen of fans coming a- across the city towards the stadium. At 4:45 p.m., the tragedy struck. A slab over a drain collapsed near Gate 7, and there was a panic leading to a stampede at gates 1, 6, 7, and 17. Emergency failure. What happened? The ambulances struggled to reach victims. The network was too congested for many to call for help. At 7:30 p.m., casualties were confirmed, 11 deaths, and the data trail forensic logs showed the danger zone was digitally visible by 2:30 p.m. itself. So, what can we learn from this tragedy and ensure this doesn't happen again? There was a digital footprint of crowds converging, you know, to a dangerous level to one cellular hotspot near the or one cell tower near the Chinnaswamy Stadium. How can any system, tell us about such patterns? So the system already records this uh, events. So there are systems in place. When a phone actually connects to the network, it actually connects to the nearest cell tower, what's called a cell tower data. So there are systems which are in place, and there could be systems that could be put in place, like preventative measures, there's potential preventative potential, and also the policing systems can be slightly made digital aware, uh, so that these kind of patterns can be observed of crowds converging, and suitable steps can be taken to avoid such stampedes. Excuse me. Any use of telecom data must follow Indian privacy law. Note, due to legal regulations, any use of telecom data must follow Indian privacy law, due process, and judicial oversight. Now we look at one of the items, the cell tower data. In a telecommunications forensics context, there's a parameter called a cell site location information, which can map crowd density in real time. So if you see the image here, you can see the crowd density as a heat map. For the RCB incident, this data existed, but was likely not integrated into a live command center so that actions could be taken. What is the preventative potential here? If we can set up a geofence or a density trigger, then such extreme populations converging in a very small area can be figured out easily. So, had a geofence or a density trigger been active, such stampedes could have been forecast, or people could have been forewarned, or necessary steps could have been taken. So, that is one preventative step possible. Had there been a density trigger, the civic authorities would have known that there would be a surge 2 hours before the stampede. And as fans moved across Bengaluru towards the M. Chinnaswamy Stadium, the civic authorities, could easily have taken necessary steps to divert the population, uh, suspecting that there could be a stampede. That's the preventative potential with a geofence or a density trigger that could be set up. Next, we look at the policing systems. Most Indian policing systems sometimes are reactive. I'm not saying all, but most are reactive. Monitoring needs to shift from reactive to proactive based on digital signals. So when we have all the digital signals available, when that data can be used by the policing systems, there can be better outcomes. For instance, the RCB tweet, which was shared across quite many times, this leaves a digital footprint that, or a data point that this was one of the most shared tweets about a celebration. And because that was shared quite much, there was already information that, you know, people would converge on the Chinnaswamy Stadium. So combined with the real-time telecom heat maps that we can see from the telecom cell tower data or the handoff data, what's called the handoff data, when a phone is like a heartbeat, you know, and when all the phones converge, you can see a lot of heartbeats in some ways, and that can be seen as heart map, a heat map, and this information about heat maps can be used better to create some kind of barriers so that people don't converge, uh, in un manageable numbers. So that is something that can be done even today. What are the broader implications from the RCB stampede that we can learn from? India has had a history of stampedes. People have lost lives for many years, and my aim with this video is to actually point that, digital information together with the information from the heat maps and other digital sources can be intelligently used to predict crowd behavior, uh, you know uh, crowd surges in particular areas to avoid these kind of stampedes. Some of the major stampedes that have occurred in the past are at Mahakumbh Mela, Hathras, and Vaishno Devi Temple. So, if we can look at the city density and the other, uh, outliers, data outliers, we can actually make sure that there are checks and balances so that we should not have the number of deaths in stampedes that we see today. So the risks are growing, but without integrating telecom intelligence, we are kind of playing Russian roulette. So that's that's unfortunate if we don't, integrate data which exists already. So some of the viewers might have this question that, if the telecommunication authorities share this data with the police authorities or any other body, what happens to the privacy? Is it safe? So one thing to point out here is that I'm not proposing individual tracking of citizens, nor am I proposing monitoring private communications. No permanent surveillance is being infrastructure is being set up, or invasion of personal privacy will not be uh, done or proposed is not proposed. All I'm proposing is anonymized aggregate crowd density data, temporary monitoring for large announced public events where there's a possibility of crowds surge, heat mapping without individual identification, public safety protocols similar to traffic monitoring. These are the things that can be put in place, or this is a proposition. Think of the telecom data like traffic cameras on highways. They don't track where you are going, they don't know who you are, they just monitor flow to prevent accidents. Now we talk about the ethical framework, the principle. uh, that's the elephant in the room. Is it ethical to share, data about crowd behaviors? The government is duty bound to protect public safety from hazards which are predictable and preventable. So the government has a job to do, and they should use the data to avoid hazards like stampedes. The analogy again is of traffic monitoring, weather alerts, food safety inspection. Crowd safety through telecommunication data is basically preventative public health. The safeguards that are there, the data will be temporarily shared, it will be anonymized, transparent protocols, judicial oversight, purpose limitation. All of this, you know, help us avoid kind of the RCB Stampede again. 11 people dead. Uh, we have to prioritize accountability and prevention when it comes to lives of people and safety. The unheard warning. Why I called the unheard warning is because the dangerous buildup was digitally seen, data existed, but probably was never consulted. 11 lives were lost. Telecom data can be a commodity and a life saving tool. Technology didn't fail, it provided all these signs. If you look at the timeline slide again, cell towers were always having all the information, they were listening. We need a national framework where, events where more than 50,000 people are expected. There can be, checks and balances to avoid stampedes, and uh, it should be transparent, and there should be oversight over such events, and it should be preventable in terms of public safety, that there shouldn't be any hazards like the stampede. So the main agenda of this video is that, is there a next stampede coming? How can we prevent it? Will we act in time? So that's why I'm making this video, to highlight that there are technology solutions possible, and we should avoid stampedes as much as possible using technology. My final call to action is, we owe the victims more than sympathy. We owe them change. If you believe that technology should serve public safety, share this video. If you work in telecommunications, law enforcement, or event management, start the conversation in your organization. The data is already there, the technology is there, the framework exists. All that's missing is the will to implement it. This is about anonymized aggregated data, not tracking individuals. Let's make sure that Bengaluru, Prayagraj, and Hathras are remembered not just as tragedies, but as turning points. This is Rethink, and thanks for watching.